Ronald Ron McCormick Kinney II, otherwise known as Mr. Kinney. He was loyal to his friends, eager to be involved, quirky, awkward, and often unaware of how little space he actually occupied. Kinney spent his life close to other people's success, admiring it, supporting it, and mistaking proximity for progress. Naive by nature and impressionable by design, he followed influence rather than questioning it. Believing that usefulness might eventually become belonging, he did not set out to fail. He set out to be included. On this episode of Beyond the Screen Time, the story of Mr. Kinney's demise. Ronald Kinney Sr., young Kinney's father, was a blue-collar worker drawn by the promise of old Detroit's auto industry. He relocated his family in search of stability. Clocks, shifts, pensions, a system that rewarded endurance. Despite his addiction to alcohol, he worked very hard to support his family. Kinney's mother, Martha, became a stay-at-home parent shortly after his birth. The arrangement worked, for a time. Not much is known about his mother, as she was a very private woman. From an early age, Kinney exhibited behaviours that were not disruptive, but noticeable. He was awkward, often wide-eyed, alert in a way that suggested constant self-monitoring. He had a tendency to insert himself into conversations where he was neither invited nor needed, not out of confidence, but anticipation, as if being present might eventually justify itself. Kinney was not a leader, he was a follower. In elementary school, Kinney's position in the social hierarchy was established quickly. During recess games, particularly Duck, Duck, Goose, Kinney was often selected not out of kindness, but convenience. He was slow to react, slower to run, and unfamiliar with resistance. When tagged, Kinney ran because the rules required it, not because he believed he could win. He rarely did. On more than one occasion, the game ended not with laughter, but correction. On a family vacation, while his father constructed sandcastles on the beach, Kinney observed closely. At some point, he began eating the sand from the base of the structures. His father intervened. Kinney stopped. No explanation was offered. The incident was never mentioned again. In the classroom, Kinney was remembered for attentiveness and for incidents. There were documented moments of him eating glue during lessons, not as a prank, not as a dare, simply because it was there. When questioned, Kinney appeared confused rather than embarrassed. The behaviour was corrected quietly and never escalated. The memory lingered. By adolescence, the pattern was established. Kinney had learned that compliance reduced conflict, that usefulness delayed rejection. He confused proximity with belonging. Kinney wore Velcro-fastened shoes well into adolescence, not due to preference, but because he never learned to tie shoelaces properly. By high school, this became a quiet source of ridicule. Kinney adapted by avoiding situations where his shoes might be noticed. In an effort to encourage participation, Kinney was enrolled in field hockey. The attempt was brief. During a match, Kinney suffered a groin injury caused by an accidental but direct impact of the nether region. The injury was not severe, it was memorable. Kinney did not return to the sport. In college, Kinney enrolled as a business major. He did not know what he wanted to become, but he knew what he did not want to be. He did not want manual labour. He did not want his father's life. It was during this period that Kinney befriended Robert Bob Morton. Morton was charismatic, popular, confident. A recipient of the OCP Fellowship, Morton enjoyed a full ride and the freedom to double major in business and science. Ethics did not factor heavily into his decisions. Ambition did. Morton's interest in science expressed itself less academically and more recreationally. He spent nights drinking beer and assembling crude mechanical devices from erector sets, treating robotics as a game rather than a discipline. During these sessions, Kinney was often sent out to purchase alcohol while Morton remained behind, experimenting. Morton built, Kinney fetched. Morton was a heavy partier, drugs, alcohol, women. Despite this, Morton excelled academically. Kinney did not. He carried Morton's backpack, held his books, ran errands. At parties, Kinney was subjected to sustained peer pressure. Participation was mandatory, benefit was not. Kinney was excluded from women and often belittled in front of them. He was frequently made the chauffeur, driving Morton and his companions late into the night without acknowledgement. Morton referred to himself as a big city guy. Kinney was not. "That's life in the big city," Morton would say. Kinney accepted this as instruction. At one such party, Morton and Kinney met Donald Johnson. Johnson was confident, socially adept, well-connected. Morton gravitated toward him immediately. Johnson was cooler, more visible, more respected. Kinney noticed the shift. He said nothing. One day, Morton was arrested for drug possession. The situation resolved itself quickly. Morton bribed the responding officers and was released without charges. The experience left a lasting impression. Morton did not see corruption as a flaw. He saw opportunity. Human police were unreliable, corruptible, vulnerable. A machine would not be. A robot would not hesitate. A robot would not take bribes. A robot would not fail him. At the same time, Omni Consumer Products was preparing its most ambitious initiative. Delta City, a privatized metropolis built atop the ruins of old Detroit. Morton understood the implication immediately. Whoever controlled law enforcement would control the city. Robotic police were not just efficient, they were profitable. The RoboCop program was initially conceived as fully mechanical, but Morton could not secure funding. The ethics were indefensible, the optics were poor. So Morton adjusted the pitch. If the robot was part human, if a living brain guided the machine, the project could be framed as restraint rather than replacement. Humanity, not automation. Funding would be guaranteed. All that was required was a body. Within Omni Consumer Products, knowledge of the project was compartmentalized. Too many voices raised questions. Questions slowed momentum. Kinney knew about the project. Not because he was trusted, but because Morton never considered him a risk. This was a mistake. Kinney talked. Not maliciously, not strategically. He talked because he wanted to be included. Fragments of the idea circulated. Morton noticed. When Morton sought funding, resistance followed. Ethics committees stalled, executives hesitated. Morton concluded the issue was not the idea, it was exposure. Kinney's need to be heard had contaminated the pitch. Richard Jones' ED-209 project appeared cleaner. Fully mechanical, no human brain, no moral ambiguity, at least on paper. ED-209 received the funding. Morton did not. Morton's resentment toward Kinney hardened. Kinney was not disloyal. He was worse. He was loud. When the ED-209 demonstration took place, it was not supposed to fail publicly. But it did. Kinney was killed. Morton recognized the moment for what it was, not a tragedy, an opportunity. Kinney's organs were harvested, his biological components were repurposed. Morton announced that he could move to prototype within 90 days. The RoboCop program advanced with a preliminary prototype on Kinney's remains, until a more suitable and permanent law enforcement volunteer would be available. Morton ascended within Omni Consumer Products. Johnson ascended with him. From glue sticks and playground sand, to junior executive lunches, borrowed escorts, and tequila shots taken off the wrong dancers, Kinney gave everything he had to the company, and most of it to Bob Morton. He spoke too freely, loved too loyally, and believed too deeply. His timing was unfortunate. Mr. Kinney will be missed. That's it for this episode of Beyond the Screen Time. Subscribe for future episodes documenting the lives left behind by the narrative. The screen moves on, they don't. Thank you for watching.